Chris, the last time we were talking about aesthetic cognitivism together like this, we were on the beach in Nassau, and it was before the first planning meeting, which has been part of this vision that you've had about aesthetic cognitivism. And now we're in Grand Rapids, and it is after the second planning meeting. And so you've now had this tense, enriching 2 days in each place with a dozen or so of the leading philosophers, theologians, social scientists, neuroscientists, artists. How has your understanding of aesthetic cognitivism been shaped or changed in any way?
Well, I think it's become more nuanced. I think when we started just defining the idea and in an internal conversation, internal to Templeton, to align the idea with our mandates, because we're all fiduciaries. We're not pursuing our own vision, we're pursuing the vision of Sir John. So, why is this aligned? Why is this important? Why is this worth doing? It's like the question we often ask applicants, so tell me what your idea is, tell me what your plan is, and then answer the question, who cares? Why is this significant? Not just to you, I know why you care, but why should anyone else care? So why should we care? So that's the question we start with. So we define the idea very broadly. So in terms of the kind of broad concepts that Sir John has about spiritual information, about the ways that people come to an understanding and make discoveries about spiritual reality. But that's pretty broad. And what you don't know is whether or not you'll be able to communicate that to researchers, top drawer researchers, in a way that they can understand and then tell you how this gets traction within, with respect to questions that are tractable in their domains, scientifically, right? Where can we proceed? And these are often people that are very interesting people themselves, have a lot of interest that go well beyond the specific research that they do that motivates it, so they can get the wider vision and then help you to say, well, how do you build up to that, something as broad and seemingly inchoate as something like spiritual information? How do you break that down into things that are can be understood and studied? So it's become more nuanced in that sense, in understanding, what exactly, how do we describe the phenomena that we're interested in ways that then we can ask questions, the right kinds of questions that scientists can help us with, but which are also defined by people like philosophers and theologians who can ask the questions in ways that are going to be meaningful and relevant, because it's very easy for scientists to work on very, very particular issues, and it's hard to see how you're going to build from that back out to these big, larger questions that you're interested in.
So this is a really important point. So did you make some progress in that? Because what I saw, what was interesting, is that you had different kinds of sessions. And sometimes you brought all the philosophers, scientists, and artists and kept them in their own disciplines with their own peers or quasi-peers. Sometimes you mixed them up. So you had all different kinds of interactions. And so, how, in terms of the concepts themselves and in the nuance, what progress or what has been your enriched understanding of what aesthetic cognitivism is?
Yeah. So, for example, if you think about the experiences that people have, you think about the sort of phenomenology of religious experience, and how. Just in general, for example. So feelings, could be feelings that people have of desire or arousal or a sense of the numinous or of the holy or the sacred, the sense that you're in the presence of something that goes beyond what you see in front of you that's not you, and things like that. So you break down the sort of phenomenology of religious experience a little bit more. And even attitudinal things like humility, for example, which in many religious traditions is very important in the approach to God. It's very difficult to approach spiritual reality or to approach the divine from a position of pride or arrogance. Pascal got this, right? So he's like, so you humble yourself. First step is toward coming to a consciousness of the reality of God is to come to God in humility. And that puts you in a better epistemic position. So anything that creates that sense of humility. So you sort of...
and the arts can do that.
The arts can do that. And then you sort of say, well, how does that happen in the context of the arts?
Yeah,
right?
right,
That becomes the
right,
next
right,
question.
right.
So how can the arts, engagement with the arts, stimulate desire and arousal for something more?
And a sense of humility, too.
And a sense of humility, right? Or Nicholas Walterstorff, who was with us, talks about transference. Right? He has this term for that idea where you take the experience and you take it. In what context does anything, including, say, a work of art, point to something other than itself?
Right.
How does that happen? Right. And what are the conditions that inhibit it? What are the conditions that encourage it? I mean, you can see if we do this right, you have all kinds of implications for the ways that people experience the arts, depending on what your goals are. If your goals are more limited and you're just interested in the phenomenology of the sound, or if it's a concert or something like that, or the visual, you're just interested in the light or whatever. But if you're interested in what art can do beyond that, then you become interested in these contextual factors.
It's like a hierarchy. I mean, each step relates to the other. At the basic level, you want to hear about the tones and the sounds and the lights and how those things may be part of building this emotional experience. Right. And then you can ask, does that emotional experience relate to something beyond you, or is that just a feeling? And at different levels, different people that I've talked to here have different levels of confidence about what you can do, and that's fine. Yeah. And that's fine, because you want everybody specializing in what they are confident on.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there are, in the context of aesthetic experience, for example, I mean, it really, in some sense, you deal with studies just of perception, right? So there's certain kinds of aspects of perceptual experience that are going to be particularly interesting or relevant in the context of aesthetic experience, like cross-modal perception. How do multiple sense modalities interact? Studies of attention, how is people's attention directed? One thing that came out a little bit in the first meeting we had, but more strongly in this meeting, was how do people react to silence? Just what's going on, when you, in the context of sort of a sense or multiple senses are deprived of input. What does that stimulate? Some people, deep anxiety. Other people, they have other experiences that are not ordinary. So things like that. But so that's sort of the sort of cognitive science, neuroscience toolkit. Already it's beginning to be clear that there are certain sorts of tools at the basic level, the sort of what's going on in the neurobiology, physiologically and so on, that we're going to be more interested in while we're defining the questions, coming up with the kind of conceptual catalog. What are the types of experiences that we're interested in? So the philosophers and theologians can help define those. This is kind of a...
So as I hear this, and sort of as a third party, kind of both involved and apart, what I sense is that when we talked about it prior to the first session, it was a coarse-grained understanding of the whole picture, which is still there, but now it becomes much more fine-grained, and you see the different components, what they are, how I mean, that's both exciting and confusing, because you have a lot more buzzing going on. I mean, before, when you have the big vision, it looks great. Now you have all the pieces.
That's right.
Do you feel that? Do you feel attention? Do you feel
very
attention?
Much so, because you feel like, well, have we just kicked up a lot of dust?
Right.
That's making it harder to see what we want to do. And so the challenge is going to be for us now to piece it together into a strategy.